Hey guys, welcome to Denny's. Today we're going to be diving into Ultimate Sharen. More specifically, we're going to go into a few builds, show you one that nets you around 90 to 100 million overall damage in your 400% dungeons, and some one-phase bossing builds. So don't forget to subscribe if you feel that I have earned it today, and follow me over on Twitch for some daily live streams. But other than that, let's jump right into the video. Also, one more thing before we get started. I am a Nexon creator, and I don't know if you guys knew this, but the Nexon support expires. So if you have supported me in the past on the Nexon Creator Program, it actually expires. So if you guys want to be a supporter of mine, you can check out the link in the description. I'll also have it in the pinned comment, but I promise no more wasting time. We'll actually get into it now. So first things first, we're going to go into the Descendant modules first. So going over 3 builds, we're going to start with my favorite one first. It's going to be what I call the Release Cutting Force build. So this build utilizes the Release Cutting Force Transcendent mod that Sharen has. Basically modifies her first ability to make it so that it is kind of pushed out in front of you as like it says a sword aura, but you could think of it as like a blast kind of right in front of you, just straight ahead. It has a pretty far range as well. They did recently buff this, and honestly, I can say this is probably one of my favorite builds in the entire game just because of how satisfying it is to use. I knew that I was going to love this ability when I first saw it. It was just sad how little damage it did, but now that it does a ton, we're going to go into the build for it. So on screen, I should have a screenshot of the build. We'll kind of throw up the mods, and then I'll quickly go over why I'm using each one. So for the Cutting Force build, we've got increased HP. Every single one of these is going to have increased HP, except for some circumstances. The bossing build is going to not have that for solo bossing. But we'll go into this. So focus on Fusion and Electric. Both of those, mainly because we basically want the shortest cooldown that we can get on all of our abilities, not just Cutting Force, because it is nice to have the Flash Short Sword, your 4th ability, down from a minute to 15 seconds with this build. So we're using Focus on Fusion, Focus on Electric, Nimble Fingers, and MP conversion for that. You get a giant amount of, obviously, skill cooldown, and then there are main damage dealers. So pretty straightforward there. A lot of these builds are going to use crit mods. In this build, however, I'm only using skill concentration, front lines, and emergency measures. Now, you can use 4 crit mods with this if you want to take off skill expansion. However, I didn't really want to take off skill expansion. I believe it adds so much quality of life. Whenever you use your Release Cutting Force, it's just that much wider. It's double, basically twice as tall and twice as wide as it normally would be. So it hits a lot more, and you'll notice the difference when you don't have that on. So normally 4 skill crit mods, but I'm going to go with 3 because we're using, obviously, a Blue Beetle, which I'll go into in a second. But yeah, those are the 3 crit mods we're going to use. Skill concentration, frontlines, emergency measures. Then we've got skill expansion for the range, like I said, and then MP collector. Now, MP collector, you don't need it. For a lot of the mobbing in the game, you can literally just run like Dangerous Ambush if you want to. That way you just do a little bit more damage because you're invisible a lot of the time and you're hitting people that can't really target you because you're hitting through walls and stuff. This build is really, really cool because you get to like basically hit through walls. The Release Cutting Force goes through walls, and it's fantastic. You're basically immune to damage because you're always able to just kind of go behind something and damage things, which is really cool. It's kind of like her 4th ability, the Void Domination there. But yeah, that is the Descendant module setup for the Cutting Force build. I do want to go over the gameplay loop as well. So for the gameplay loop, it's pretty straightforward. This is probably the most simple gameplay loop of all 3 of the builds. You're basically just spamming your first ability. I mean, you're going behind walls when you can, spamming your first ability, and then keeping your second ability on cooldown whenever a boss comes up or you have just one target to deal with. Void Domination, her 4th ability, or excuse me, Flash Short Sword, her 4th ability, does an absolute ton of damage. It pretty much one phases most dungeon bosses, takes out their entire health bar, especially when you're inside that stealth. You can, like I said, get rid of skill expansion and get that extra crit mod in there, and then you'll basically always just destroy everything. However, with Blue Beetle, I don't really think that you need it because when you're in active camo anyway, your second ability, you do get a 22% flat skill critical hit rate increase. Basically, just for popping that ambush buff, that is a flat increase as well. So it just goes adds on right onto the top of your crit, which is really nice. Obviously, any other crit you've added too. So it gets you up to like 90% crit if you have crit hit rate on your reactor, which is really, really nice. So yeah, that's the Descendant modules and the gameplay loop for the Release Cutting Force build. We'll move on to the bossing build and permanent stealth build next. I do want to mention we are going to go over the components and reactors and everything on the second half of the video. That way you guys can see all those and everything that I use for those. But right now we're going to swap over to the bossing build. Okay, so the bossing build. So this build I'm not using. In this screenshot you'll see here I have Spear and Shield. I want to put a fat disclaimer out. Guys, this is where I put my HP mod. The only reason I have Spear and Shield here is for when I was trying to kill Executioner. The only way I could actually kill Executioner without like a level 5 upgraded reactor and like a perfected everything else is basically by putting on Spear and Shield. It gave me that much more damage to actually kill him. Believe it or not, it added quite a bit. Usually I was getting him down to like just a sliver of health without it, and then Spear and Shield kind of helped me finish him off. It is a little bit crit dependent as well because they are crit resistant, but yeah, that was my Executioner kill. Usually I just want to make sure you guys know you definitely want to put HP here. Pretty much all my other boss kills can be done with using the HP mod, but we'll go into it. So focus on Fusion Electric again, as well as Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion. Literally the same exact setup as before, all of our cooldown right there. And then this time we're running 4 of our modules for crit, and that is because we want as much crit as we can get, and that is to do with Area Suppression. So Area Suppression is the Transcendent mod that we'll be using. Basically how this works is whenever you get a critical hit, you get a 1 second reduction in cooldown on the ability. So out of the 10 daggers that hit the boss, we need to make sure or try our hardest to get 5 of them to crit, because with all the cooldown mods, our cooldown is 5.1 seconds of this ability. So we want to try to get as much crit as we can. That's why we have the crit maxed out as far as we can get it, right? And that's going to basically make it so we can spam Area Suppression. You can probably see in the background footage I was killing those bosses, if that's over or not yet, but it's basically just spamming it because you're able to just do that with the cooldown decrease that it gives you. And it's pretty straightforward. Now, I do have Dangerous Ambush as well. Dangerous Ambush, I mean, it's just for bossing, really. You can obviously run this like for non-bossing. If you want to run this as like a mobbing build, you could just put an MP recovery there, and that is the one thing you could change. It's honestly pretty fun. The only problem is I don't really have as much fun with it as I do Release Cutting Force, because I feel like being up close and personal with Sharen, even with an HP mod, you're kind of squishy, and it's just not... I just enjoy Cutting Force more for mobbing, and then the other build as well. So this is the one that I chose for bossing. As far as the bossing gameplay loop, I have to point out a few pretty big pointers. We've got a couple things to note. So with the Inversion Tree, which I will be going over at the end, again, to show you guys what I'm using, but I just want to point out that for the bossing, every single time you enter an arena, you want to basically spam all of your abilities until you get your 14th or 15th stack of Quantum Domain. If you have Quantum Domain unlocked, it's the bottom row of the Inversion Tree. This gives us a pretty decent chunk. It's like a Spear and Shield level amount of skill power, and you're basically getting it for free without having a mod, which is really, really nice. And it does increase Sharen's damage by a good amount, so I always make sure to pre-stack that. And that's pretty much it. As far as the gameplay loop, you're literally just pre-stacking that, making sure you go into stealth before the boss spawns. You want to be right underneath the boss right before they are damageable, and you are just spamming that 4th ability. The only downside really to this is the fact that you are basically running out of MP a lot. You can only get so many casts off of it, and honestly, I'm still probably going to use somebody like Lepic for Swamp Walker or Haley, because even though Sharen can kill him pretty reliably, it is extremely RNG based, and with Sharen the RNG is even more because you only get so many casts of your 4th ability, and if you don't crit, you're pretty much screwed. Even though you have 90% crit rate, if you don't crit, you're pretty much screwed. So that is the bossing build. Still a really good bossing build, obviously able to kill all the solo bosses in like seconds. Obviously Devourer it can kill in like 3 seconds or something like that. I didn't even put Devourer in here because I feel like at this point Greg's Reverse Fate can pretty much kill him in like 3 seconds. He's just kind of useless. But anyway, that's the bossing build. That's the bossing gameplay loop. We'll hop over to the kind of crazy build next, the permanent stealth one. Okay, so the permanent stealth build. So this build is more or less very similar to the rest, with a few differences, and then the Transcendent mod that we are going to be using of choice is going to be Ambushed. So Ambushed is the brand new mod that obviously came out with Season 2 for Sharen. It's Ultimate Sharen exclusive. Now, this mod basically makes it so that you can stay in stealth forever. There is literally no changes other than that. You do get some cooldown decrease, which is nice. Obviously, you didn't get that cooldown decrease in the other one. you do get a giant chunk of movement speed. It's about 10% more than the other without using ambushed. And then it also ends up costing a bit more MP, but that ends up being okay because we're going to use MP collector. But moral of the story is you get to stay in active camo forever as long as you get kills. So you need to make sure that you're getting kills, and you need to kind of note like what abilities you're using and how long you have left on this. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. So I've got the screenshot up now. We'll go over the mods. So obviously increased HP. Focus on both of our mods again for the Fusion and Electric, Cooldown, Nimble Fingers, MP Conversion. 3 crit mods again. Now this, again, I want to go over why we're using 3 crit mods. So in this ambush state of camo state, you get 22% flat crit. So you're pretty much not worrying about crit at all. You don't need the Insight mod. You do not need the Insight mod whatsoever. You're going to be able to have 100% crit with this setup as long as you're using Blue Beetle, and you'll get that 100% crit. Now, the only thing about this one is I'm using skill expansion, and that is because I want my frangible rounds, my third ability, which another thing that ambushed the Transcendent mod changes is your third ability ends up being a ranged missile that is more or less doing a ton of damage. It does a lot of damage, and the range on it is not that great, so we want to try to get more range out of it. A lot of people throw duration here. You guys can absolutely do that. It uses the rutile socket as well, so you can throw duration here if you wanted to. It'll increase your ambush state. That gives you a little bit more time to get the kills or wherever you're at. Personally, I think 4 seconds is plenty when you're doing things like invasion dungeons, and with all the cooldown that we have built in, it comes off cooldown in 5 seconds anyway. So honestly, I don't think that duration is something that I like. However, I understand why people do, and you can definitely socket it in there in place of that range, but we want our third ability to just do a giant amount of explosion damage, and that is kind of why I chose that. Now, for the MP collector, obviously it's not like the third ability costs a lot of MP, but it's the combination of using the second and third ability if you ever run out, and then obviously just having the MP to spam your third ability. Again, you don't need MP collector if you want to run something like Dangerous Ambush here, because you're picking up a lot of blue MP packs on the ground whenever you're doing mobbing activities. You can absolutely run Dangerous Ambush here and do a ton more damage. If you want to do that for Void Vessel, or you want to do that for 400% to do more damage to the boss, you definitely can. Dangerous Ambush also uses the Xantic slot, just like MP Collector, so you can interchange those as you please. Dangerous Ambush being a really, really good mod there. And that is pretty much it for the Permastealth Descendant modules. Let's go over the gameplay loop really quickly. So the gameplay loop is going to be more or less, obviously, you're hitting your second ability, and for most of the time you shouldn't really have to worry about pressing any other buttons other than your third ability. Now I do use my first ability quite a bit because I do get that extra range from having the skill expansion. Whenever mobs are close to me and they're not like exploder mobs, I'll try to pay attention, but a lot of the time I end up killing the exploder mobs and almost killing myself. But with frangible rounds, we're literally able to spam that, and this is how you do billions of damage. At the end of my 400%, I think I was getting something like anywhere from like 90 to 100 billion damage overall. You'll see that every time we crit, it's like 2 to 3 million, and it's just absurd. I mean, if you were to add another range mod onto this, it would actually probably be pretty insane. Honestly, I was thinking about trying that in place of my MP collector, but not too sure if I want to add another socket to Sharen, because I've already done about 11 or 12 now. Or not 11 or 12, around 8 to 9, I believe. But either way, very, very good build. The only thing I'll mention as far as the gameplay loop is just make sure that you are more or less kind of watching the travel distance of your third ability. If you're planning on using your second ability and then using your third ability, whenever it's kind of a clunky mechanic that it has, that it doesn't describe it, it doesn't explain it in the description at all, but whenever you use an ability and you don't get a kill with that ability for a certain amount of time, it actually takes you out of stealth. So if you shoot your frangible rounds like across the room, you're definitely not going to be in stealth anymore by the time they get over there, and it's not going to put you back in. So just take note of where you're at and where the enemies are at. Always try to be a little bit closer to the enemies to make sure that your frangible rounds gets a kill in the time of that like clunky time where you're out. It puts you out of stealth if you don't get a kill fast enough. It is not the same as the actual duration. That is not it. Trust me, it's literally just whenever you use an ability, it puts you out of stealth. Obviously, it actually does say that as well. Whenever you use an ability, active camouflage ends and triggers ambush. However, with the frangible round specifically, it's like using the ability and giving you like 1 second to get a kill with it before it'll take you out. So I wanted to put that out there for anybody that was curious about that for the gameplay loop. To kind of just take note of that and don't shoot that frangible round too far. But that's the permanent stealth build. Let's jump into the weapons, reactors, components, etc. really quickly. All right, so for the weapons, really not too long, hopefully not going to spend too long on this. We're talking about the Blue Beetle. So the Blue Beetle, going over the unique ability really quickly, obviously with the Arcane Wave, using a fusion skill grants Arcane Energy, which gives you a skill critical hit rate increase of 115%. So because Sharen's critical hit rate is 20%, it basically gives us like right around 22% increased crit. This is why we're able to run the 3 critical mods instead of 4, with Insight being the one that we drop. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously, the trigger rate is not 100% with this thing if you don't have it maxed up, so I definitely recommend to max this guy out because it helps quite a bit. But the Blue Beetle is what you're definitely going to want to use. As far as the build on it, I don't have it built out. I actually never use it. I actually don't think scout rifles are that good. Obviously, if you were to build it out, I'm sure that it would absolutely chunk. It would do some damage for sure. However, only thing that I really use on it, guys, is Defense Master. The reason I use Defense Master on it, it's kind of a given. I mean, when defeating an enemy, defense plus 128% for 10 seconds, and then obviously leveling it up reduces the cooldown. It's just a really good mod for weapons that you don't really use, and you're just using them for skill builds. So yeah, Defense Master is pretty solid. I use Defense Master on it, and that's about it. As far as other weapons, I'll throw my Volsha build up on screen. This is the only other gun that I use with Sharen right now. I'm leveling up Smithereens currently, but yeah, this is the only other gun that I use on Sharen. You can see I made a Volsha build guide, so I go into detail on why I'm using these things, but that is the Volsha build that I'm using there. And then that is it for the weapons. Let's jump over to the reactor. All right, so going over the reactor, we'll go over the bossing reactor first. So obviously, the main thing we're really worried about on the reactor, just make sure that you have the scout rifle weapon group mounted. That is the only thing that you are extremely worried about. And then as far as bossing, I mean, in order to get a lot of these kills, I did need to make sure to get that Colossus and crit hit damage combo. So I do have additional skill ATK or attack to Colossus and skill critical hit damage. Pretty straightforward for the bossing one there. And the only difference that you see on the mobbing reactor is going to be the obviously, we're still using the scout rifle weapon group mounted because we're using Blue Beetle, but I actually have one that has gold skill critical hit rate and electrical skill power boost, so you don't need the skill critical hit rate as much. I only have this for the release cutting force build. You actually don't need this at all for the permanent stealth build. If you were looking for best in slot reactors for mobbing, it's pretty much going to be electrical skill power boost ratio and fusion boost ratio, in my opinion. Obviously, you can run like cooldown if you want to run more on the mods and whatnot, or you can run range or what have you. But excuse me, I didn't need to say electrical skill boost power ratio. It would be critical hit damage and fusion damage. That would be the best in slot for mobbing, in my opinion, just because of the amount of crits that we're doing and whatnot. But yeah, that is the reactors. Jump over to the components. Okay, so the components. So it should come as no surprise that for most of this, if you can get away with using the Slayer set, you're going to want to use the Slayer set. It does the most damage. It does a lot of damage, and it is what it is. It's just kind of what the state the game's in right now with components. I'm sure it'll change. They do have plans to change that. However, Slayer set is going to be it. Now, if you are worried about tankiness, I basically just run HP components. So, like, it doesn't really matter what they are. I'll use, like, maybe the new one, the Hunter one, to give me some more cooldown, and then I sometimes use Annihilation to get me some more duration. As long as I'm using the ones that give me max HP, whatever it ends up being, I just use components that have max HP, but all the roles are always the same, guys. For the Aux Power, you want max HP, MP recovery out of combat. The Sensor, you want max MP recovery out of in combat. For the memory, you want MP recovery modifier and defense. And then for the processor, it literally does not matter at all. I just like to make sure that I have equipment drop rate modifier just to get more reactors, basically, just because of all the materials we're going to be needing for the reactor upgrades up to 5. But yeah, that's the components. Pretty straightforward. It's really always it's pretty much almost always the same. It's kind of unfortunate. So looking forward to the day that changes. But that is pretty much it. That is the build. As far as components and everything, I do want to go over the inversion reinforcement, so we'll jump into that next. All right, so the inversion reinforcement. So inversion reinforcement really depends on how far you are leveled up. It's not a giant amount of damage increase, but it's some nice quality of life bumps and some good damage as well. So the main two that I really want to talk about are going to be neuro concentration reinforcement Arcade Boost. Those are the two that we'll be using. And then the one that you get for maxing out the seasonal row, it's called Quantum Domain. So how this looks for Arcade Boost. So Arcade Boost makes it so that whenever you hit 5 or more enemies with a skill, you get minus 15% skill cooldown, and your skill speed and range increase modifier is plus 11%. With Sharen, and especially with Cutting Force, this is awesome because Cutting Force actually does have a speed modifier, and this fits in perfectly with that. So that's why we use that. Obviously, for bossing, I would recommend changing this out for Void Resistance. Void Resistance is going to be the one that basically makes it so whenever your HP is below 50% in intercept battles, you get a giant damage modifier reduction of 16.5%. And then, yeah, Neuro Concentration, obviously giving you the MP by 0.4% up to 5 stacks, and then modifier by 1.5 up to 5 stacks. So just MP increased and MP recovery increased for that. And then Quantum Domain, I kind of explained it earlier, but Quantum Domain, you want to spam this is for spam builds. This is for builds that use abilities. You're getting range and skill power, and you're getting like 8 or so percent skill power, and then a solid like 10 to 12% range. I didn't do the math there, I just guessed. But anyway, it's really good, and I love it. It's just a nice passive damage, and it's cool to see that finally we have something decent from the tree there with that. But that is pretty much the Inversion Tree. I do use the attributes usually for like the focus rounds. For whenever I'm doing Void Vessel, I do chill focus rounds. But other than that, that's pretty much it for the Sharen build that I use for the Inversion Reinforcement. So there's that. And then I'm curious what you guys think of Ultimate Sharen. Do you think she's too weak, just right? Do you think she's underpowered? Definitely let me know in the comments below. I would love to know what you guys think of Ultimate Sharen. I think she's cooked just right. I think she can pretty much do every piece of content in the game really well. I particularly enjoy the Cutting Force build just because I knew that I was going to like it, and it's really, really fun. I know that, the other builds can be better, but I just love Cutting Force. It's so fun to play, and I've been playing it a whole ton, so really, really fun. Other than that, though, guys, don't forget to leave a like if it helped you out. If you want to support what I do a bit further than subscribing, the link to my Patreon is down below. I appreciate all the patrons that have supported me thus far. And don't forget to join the Discord as well. If you guys want to play TFD with other people, we have people in the Discord. The Denny's Community Discord is located in the description below. And I stream on Twitch, so definitely follow me over there. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, night, wherever you're at. But I'm out of here, guys. Peace out. Goodbye.